I always thought the weirdest thing that could happen at a family dinner was someone bringing up politics or religion. I never imagined it would be a text message, a single line that would shift everything I thought I knew about my life. It was Sunday evening, just like always. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, my mom humming softly in the kitchen, my dad in a good mood, telling a story I'd probably heard 3 times before. The house smelled like cinnamon and comfort. I was home, or at least I thought I was. My phone buzzed on the table. At first I ignored it. We have a loose no-phones rule during dinner. But when it buzzed again a second later, short, sharp, I glanced down. Just one message. No contact name. Just a number I didn't recognize. Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents. I stared at it. My heart kicked once, hard. Then again, faster. The words didn't feel like a joke. They felt like something urgent and personal. My throat tightened. My hands started to sweat. I looked up. My mom was slicing bread. My dad was going on about how bad the Yankees blew it last night. Nothing in their expressions hinted that anything was wrong. Nothing strange, nothing off. But suddenly, the room felt smaller. My seat felt warmer. And the sound of their voices, it felt distant, like I was underwater. "Sorry," I said, clearing my throat. "I think I left my wallet in the car." I pushed my chair back, too fast. It scraped loudly against the tile. My mom blinked. "You're okay?" "Yeah, just real quick." I stepped outside and let the door close behind me. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for a full minute. I looked at my phone again. No new messages. I tapped the number. No caller ID, no recent activity, just a blank screen. Then, buzz. Another message. Don't go back inside. They're not who you think they are. I stopped cold. I felt something sharp at the base of my neck, a chill that didn't come from the night air. I turned to look through the window. There they were, still eating, still talking, still normal. But now, I wasn't sure what that meant. I copied the number, ran a quick lookup app. No name, no location, just unlisted mobile. That didn't help. I was about to head back in, maybe even make a joke about it, when the third message came through. You're not in danger, but you deserve to know the truth. There was a pause. Then a final message with a street address, one I didn't recognize, and a time. Tonight, 11 o'clock. Come alone. I lowered the phone and looked up. Across the street, standing beside a parked sedan, was a man in a dark coat. He wasn't moving, just watching me. Not threatening, but steady. Something in me said, he knows who I am. And maybe who I was supposed to be. I didn't sleep that night. I told my parents I wasn't feeling well and headed home early. My mom looked concerned. My dad offered leftovers. I nodded, smiled, did what I always do, pretended everything was fine. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking on the drive home. I must have read the messages 20 times before I even pulled into the driveway. You're not in danger, it said, and yet I'd never felt more off balance in my life. If this was some kind of mistake, why did the words hit so deep? Why did part of me already believe them? At 10:47 p.m., I was still sitting in the driver's seat with the engine running. I could have ignored it, blocked the number, gone to bed and forgotten the whole thing. But I didn't, because something inside me, something quiet and buried, had started to wake up. At 10:53, I drove to the address. It was a nondescript parking lot beside a shuttered auto repair shop, the kind of place you'd pass 100 times and never notice. One streetlight flickered above a cracked sidewalk. The only other car in the lot was a silver sedan parked in the shadows. I pulled up a few spaces away and waited. At exactly 11 o'clock, the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out, mid-40s maybe. Long coat, clean-shaven, sharp posture. He walked toward me slowly, not cautious, not threatening, just direct. I rolled the window down halfway. "Ethan?" he asked. His voice was low, calm, almost familiar. "Yes." He nodded once. "My name is Davis. I was asked to find you." "By who?" I asked. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a thin folder from his coat and handed it to me through the window. Inside were copies of old documents, birth records, adoption files. Some had stamps on them. Others looked off, like they'd been edited. "What is this?" I asked. Davis glanced around, then leaned in slightly. "It's the beginning of a story you were never told, one you have every right to know. But I won't force anything on you. You can drive away, and this ends here. Or what? Or you meet me tomorrow, somewhere quiet. I'll explain everything. I'll show you proof." I didn't say anything. I just looked down at the papers in my lap. My name was there, my birth date. But beneath it, another name, someone I didn't recognize. Davis took a step back. "Think about it, but don't wait too long. Someone's been waiting almost 30 years for this." He turned, walked calmly to his car, and drove off into the night. And I sat there, alone, holding the first crack in the story I thought was mine. I didn't go straight to bed that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the folder Davis had handed me. The house silent except for the soft hum of the fridge. I hadn't even taken off my coat. The pages inside were old, some brittle, some faded, but they all had my name on them. My birthday, my place of birth. Except not quite. The birth certificate listed a different hospital than the one I remembered, a different city even. And my parents' names, they weren't there. Instead, the space for mother was filled with a name I didn't recognize. Susan E. Hartwell. No father listed, no adoption record in the folder, just an abrupt gap in time. I stared at that name for a long time. Susan. I said it aloud, just to hear how it sounded in my voice. There was a photo tucked into the back of the folder, black and white, slightly warped, a woman holding a baby, face partially obscured by sun glare. The baby was swaddled tight, eyes shut, hand reaching upward. Something about the curve of the cheek, the shape of the forehead. It felt familiar in a way that hurt. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. By morning, I had questions, more than I could carry, but I also had fear. Because if what Davis said was true, then everything I thought I knew had been carefully curated. Not maliciously, but deliberately. And I couldn't stop asking myself one thing. If my parents, the people who raised me, loved me, sacrificed for me, had known all this, had they lied to me? Or were they lied to too? At 9:13 a.m., I texted Davis, "I want to talk today." He replied instantly with a time and location. A small diner out on Route 14, the kind of place with squeaky booths and pie that tastes better than it should. When I walked in, Davis was already there. No coat this time, just a quiet coffee in front of him and a folded manila envelope on the table. He didn't stand, didn't make it dramatic. "Morning," he said. I sat. "Who is she?" He didn't flinch. "Susan Hartwell,"
born in Kentucky, raised by her grandparents, had a son at 19. You. I swallowed hard. And then what? She gave me up? Davis shook his head slowly. No, you were taken. Silence settled between us like fog. Taken? I repeated. My voice didn't even sound like mine. There was a private clinic in Arkansas. Shut down years ago. They ran unauthorized adoptions, usually to couples who couldn't pass the usual screenings. Some parents knew, some didn't ask too many questions. I closed my eyes. My chest ached. Are you saying my parents? The people who raised me, loved me, sacrificed for me, bought me? I'm saying someone made it easy for them not to ask where you came from. The words stung, but they also rang with something cold and true. I looked at Davis. Why me? Why now? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid the manila envelope across the table. Inside were letters, dozens, all addressed to Ethan, all unopened, postmarks dating back 20 years, some from Kentucky, some from nowhere at all. One had a smudged fingerprint in the corner, like someone held it too long before letting go. I didn't find you, Davis said softly. I was asked to watch over you, quietly, until it was time. I stared at the letters, my name written in the same neat cursive, over and over, year after year. And suddenly, that voice from the voicemail came back to me. The calm, urgent tone. You don't know me, but I know who you really are.
I told myself I wasn't going there to spy. I told myself I just needed closure, something physical to match the words on those documents, something I could touch just once before everything changed. So I drove to my parents' house late that night when the lights were off and the neighborhood was quiet. My spare key still worked. I slipped in through the back door, careful not to wake the dog, and stood there in the kitchen for a moment, listening. The hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the hallway clock, the silence of a home that had always felt safe, but now felt like something else entirely. I moved slowly. My feet knew the way to the basement without thinking. I'd been down there 1,000 times. It was where my dad kept old tax folders, holiday lights, junk he never threw away. There was nothing special about it, except this time I wasn't looking for lights or tools. I was looking for a lie. The first thing I noticed was the old wooden cabinet near the back wall. It hadn't been touched in years, or so I thought, but the lock was newer than the rest of the metal, clean, unrusted. And I remembered something Davis had said at the diner just before we parted ways. You need to see what they kept before you decide who they are. I reached into my pocket. He'd given me a small brass key, said nothing when he handed it over. It fit. Inside the cabinet were 3 boxes, cardboard, unlabeled, taped shut. I opened the first. It was filled with documents, scanned birth certificates, notarized forms, photos, some with my name, others blacked out, some in English, others in languages I didn't recognize. But one envelope sat on top, almost like it had been placed there deliberately. It was thicker than the others, handwritten, addressed to someone named Dr. Marlowe. I opened it. Inside was a letter dated 30 decades ago, thanking Dr. Marlowe for making the transition smooth. It went on to say, "The couple seems ideal. They have no ties. The child will be well cared for. Payment was received. Please destroy all copies of the original file." My stomach turned. I sat on the concrete floor, papers scattered around me, my heart pounding in my ears. And then I heard footsteps above, slow, barefoot, moving down the hallway toward the kitchen. Then the soft creak of the basement door. I froze. The door opened, light spilled down the stairs. "Ethan?" My mother's voice called out, groggy but steady. "What are you doing down there?" I didn't answer right away. I gathered the files quickly, closed the cabinet, and stood up. When I reached the base of the stairs, she was already halfway down. Our eyes met. She looked tired, confused, maybe even scared, but not surprised. "Did you know?" I asked. Her lips parted, but nothing came out at first. Then softly, she said, "It was a long time ago. We thought we were doing the right thing." My voice trembled. By hiding the truth? She reached for the railing, steadying herself. "By giving you a life, a good one. That's all we ever wanted." I looked away. Behind her, the hallway lights flickered softly. The house that raised me stood still, unchanged. But I wasn't the same. I walked past her, up the stairs. She didn't stop me. When I reached the front door, I turned back. I'm not angry, but I can't pretend this never happened. She nodded once. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. Neither did I. Outside, Davis was waiting in his car across the street. He didn't get out. He just flicked the headlights once, and I knew the next door I opened wouldn't lead back home.
Davis didn't say much on the drive. Just one question. "Are you ready?" I didn't answer. The truth is, you're never ready to meet someone who lost you before you even knew yourself. The address led us to a small wooden house on the edge of a town I'd never heard of. Clean yard, modest porch, a few flowers in a cracked pot. Davis parked across the street and turned off the engine. "She's waiting," he said. "She knows I'm coming?" He nodded. "She's known for a long time. She just didn't know when." I sat still for a few seconds, staring at the front door. It wasn't fear. It was weight. The weight of crossing into a life I might have lived, a life I was part of, but never touched. Davis stayed in the car. I walked up the 3 porch steps, knocked once. The door opened slowly. She was smaller than I expected. Hair pulled back loosely, eyes deep but steady. She wore a gray sweater and held the doorframe like she needed to feel something solid beneath her hand. "Ethan," she said. That was all. No tears, no dramatic pause. Just my name, like she had been practicing it quietly for decades, waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. "Hi," I said. My voice barely worked. She stepped aside without a word, and I walked in. The house was simple. Photos on the walls, most faded, most unfamiliar. Bible verses framed here and there. A couch with a hand-stitched blanket draped across it. It looked nothing like the home I was raised in. And yet, something felt familiar. We sat down slowly. She offered me tea. I accepted but never drank it. "Where do I start?" she asked, with a soft, broken smile. "Start wherever you need to," I replied. She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were more letters, photos, a pacifier sealed in a plastic bag. She showed me a newspaper clipping from the hospital where I was born, the same one Davis mentioned, shut down years ago after allegations surfaced. She told me how she had me at 19, how she spent weeks recovering from a fever in the hospital, and how one morning I was gone. Transferred, they said, but no one told her where, and no one ever told her why. She searched for years, hired lawyers, filed reports. She was ignored, shut down, but she never stopped. Davis found her when she was just about out of hope. He offered to track me quietly, carefully, without disruption. She agreed, because all she ever wanted was to know I was okay. I saw pictures of you in high school. A friend of Davis's would take them from a distance. I saw you graduate. I saw you smile, and I knew you were loved. She looked down, voice trembling. But it still hurt, not knowing if somewhere inside you, you ever felt me missing. I said nothing, because deep down, maybe I had. She placed an old envelope on the table between us. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting delicate. It was dated 2001. Dear Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you do, I want you to know I searched for you, always, even when they told me to stop. I never stopped being your mother, not for a single minute. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for anything at all. She just sat there. And I stayed too. No big words, no decisions, just presence.
I didn't report them to the police. That's the first thing I need to say. I didn't storm into a station with a folder full of documents or demand charges be filed. That's not who I am. That's not what this was about. I gave everything to Davis. The files, the forged paperwork, the letter to Dr. Marlowe. He said he'd pass it through the right channels, discreetly. No press, no noise, just truth. Finally. Days passed, then weeks. I kept my distance. From everyone. I stayed in a rented apartment near Susan's house. Nothing fancy, just quiet. I didn't know what to call this space I was in. Between lives, maybe. Between names. Between stories. Susan didn't push. She invited me for dinner once or twice, told me I didn't have to come. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. But she always set an extra plate. One afternoon, I stood in front of her bookshelf. There was a photo tucked behind some old books. Me, from a school event I barely remembered. A photo I'd never seen. Someone had been watching from a distance. For years. Not to interfere. Just to remember. It made my chest ache. Then came the knock. It was a Tuesday. Late morning. I was folding laundry when I heard it. 3 slow knocks. Firm. I opened the door and found 2 officers. Plain clothes. Badges visible. "Mr. Chambers," one asked. "Yes. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your adoption, specifically the individuals listed as your legal guardians." My heart didn't race. I didn't panic. Because deep down, I knew this moment would come. They didn't accuse me of anything. They weren't angry, just methodical. I answered what I could, showed them what I had, explained what Davis had told me. And then the harder question came. "Do you believe your parents knew the adoption was illegal?" I paused, because part of me wanted to protect them. And part of me wanted to know for sure. But the truth? "I think they didn't ask too many questions," I said quietly, "and I think someone made that very easy for them." The officers nodded, took their notes, and left. They were respectful, careful. The next day, I heard from a former neighbor. My parents had been visited. My mom had cried. My dad hadn't said a word. I didn't reach out. Not because I hated them, but because I didn't know what I would say. Instead, I sat down that evening and opened one of Susan's old letters, one she wrote when I turned 18. "I don't know what kind of man you've become, but I pray you're kind. And I pray you know that being taken from me never made me love you less.
I read it 3 times, and for the first time since this all began, I cried. Not out of anger, but because something in me knew, no matter how complicated everything had become, I was still loved.
I didn't expect it to make the news, but it did. Not a headline on every network, just a quiet article buried on a regional site. Private adoption agency under investigation. 3 former employees arrested. 1 doctor, 2 intermediaries. And at the bottom of the article, in a line almost too small to notice, a couple from Charleston, South Carolina, identified only as former adoptive parents, cooperated with the inquiry. My parents. Still my parents, in so many ways. They weren't handcuffed, there were no mugshots, but I could feel the shame stretching across the phone lines. Neighbors asking questions, old friends avoiding eye contact. My dad stopped going to the golf club, my mom pulled away from her volunteer work. They were quiet people. Now they lived in a quieter house. I didn't visit. I still couldn't. Not yet. But I did see the photos Davis took, the ones I didn't ask for. Them in the front yard, her watering plants, alone, him reading the mail, standing still longer than he needed to. 2 people carrying a weight they never expected to hold. But they held it. Without denial, without deflecting blame. That mattered to me. Meanwhile, I stayed in Susan's town. Life there was slow. I'd walk to the corner store, hear the same greetings from the same cashier every morning. Susan and I never talked about what came next, not out loud, but we shared space. We cooked sometimes, sat on the porch. She showed me photos of her grandparents. I listened to her stories she'd saved just in case this day ever came. Then one evening she gave me something, a small wooden box. Inside, a silver bracelet, tiny, with my name engraved on it, Ethan. I asked them to keep it on you when you were transferred, she said. I didn't know they never did. I held it in my palm for a long time. And then I said, I think it's time. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't need to. That night, I drove back to Charleston. Not to confront anyone, not to yell or demand answers. Just to leave something behind. I arrived just after sunrise. The street was quiet. That kind of stillness you only get early in the morning, when the world hasn't fully decided to wake up yet. Their house looked the same. Trimmed hedges, faded porch swing. The door I used to run through as a kid still had the little scratch from where I crashed my bike into it. I didn't knock. I didn't even park in the driveway. Instead, I walked to the mailbox, the one we painted together when I was 9, and placed the envelope inside. No return address, no signature, just my handwriting. Just a letter. I wrote it the night before. I didn't write it out of anger. I told them I remembered the bedtime stories, the scraped knees, the birthday cakes they stayed up late to bake. I told them they gave me more love than many children ever get, and I thanked them. But I also said I needed time, not because I loved them any less, but because something in me had changed. I told them I had discovered a version of myself I never knew was missing, and that I wasn't ready to pretend that didn't matter. I said I wasn't walking away forever. I wasn't closing a door, but I had to walk through a different one now. One I'd never been allowed to see until recently. I stood there for a few moments,
just breathing. The wind moved through the trees, soft and indifferent. Then I turned and walked back to the car. Susan had packed a few things for me: a photo, a blanket, that tiny silver bracelet with my name on it. I drove until the town faded behind me. No music, no calls, just the road and the weight of everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. By early afternoon, I reached the edge of a quiet property she once mentioned, a place her family used to visit before everything broke apart. I stepped out of the car. There was an open field, a small pond, a few saplings planted in a row, barely tall enough to cast a shadow. I brought one more with me. I knelt in the dirt and planted it myself. No shovel, just my hands. When it was done, I sat beside it. No epiphany, no big realization. Just a stillness I hadn't felt in a long time. And as the breeze passed over me, I thought, I'm not chasing what could have been. I'm just learning how to carry both truths, the one that raised me and the one that waited.